All right, man. Everything's bigger in Texas, so let's get right into it.
Yeah, I mean, they say it is. Everything's warmer in Texas. We know that for sure. It is. It's a beautiful Tuesday. It is April 29th. The year, it's 2025. Looking forward, everybody. You listen to the Crushing Iron podcast. This is episode 848.
Yeah, it is, man.
Which 848 would be significantly slower than pretty much anyone in the pro field raced over the weekend. Yeah, we were.
It's ridiculous, dude.
It's insane, dude. We'll talk about that for sure today. But yeah, we were out of the podcasting world last week. I was down in Texas, and man, it was. I mean, it was the race itself was definitely missing some of the bigger names that we thought were going to be lining up. I mean, it was still a star-studded field for an early season race, but I don't know, Lionel Sanders was supposed to race and he got sick after Oceanside, so he bailed. Patrick Lange, I think he got a little injury. He bailed. He was already in the Woodlands training, I guess, with Blummenfelt and Eden a few times, and he was out. And then I think I saw Chelsea Sodaro. She dropped out the day before the race. But even, I mean, outside of that, it was, I mean, especially the men's field. The men's field is always a little bit deeper, I think, than the female field. But the male field was deep. The female had some, you had Knibb and Katt Matthews, which those two alone are box office. But yeah, it was a crazy race to watch. I mean, we can do like the kind of the full recap and some things I just kind of observed down there, but. I watched a little bit of the broadcast and then obviously was there on site, but, quick overview just as a spectator and a coach and someone who's been involved with the sport for such a long time. I don't know, especially the fact that neither one of them are Americans. Sometimes we can get a little bit, we don't get as pumped up about people who win that aren't for our own country. But I'm not sure you could have two better fan favorites win a huge race like that in terms of it being great for the sport than the ones we had win. I mean, first of all, both of their performances were unreal. They were unreal. I mean, Kristian Blummenfelt looked like he was on a totally different planet than everybody else that raced. Yeah. Katt Matthews ran like a woman possessed, and I somewhat think she like pulled the reins back a little bit on the second half of the run after she blew past Knibb like she was crawling. Mm-hmm. It was unreal to go. I think she went 8:10. I mean, I don't know that we're far off from a woman going sub 8 in an Ironman. Mm-hmm. I mean, if that had been Cozumel with the super quick swim, because that's the swim in Texas. From an observation standpoint, with no wetsuit for any of them, for age groupers or professionals, was one of the slowest swim times I've seen in a while. It was from age groupers and professionals. But I mean, so you take it down. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then at the end of the race, they're out there for 7 hours, 8:10 for Katt. They finished the race in dominating fashion, putting down two of the best times ever for male and female. And they're taking selfies with spectators in the crowd that are lining the kind of like the barricades, the red carpet. I mean, they weren't smashed. They weren't laying over. They weren't, like, get away from me. They're legit. Right as they cross the finish line, after a little bit of water, they're like leaning over the barricades, taking selfies with it. It'd be like, a professional baseball player crossing home plate for the win and immediately walking to the first and third baseline and just signing autographs with like it was nothing. I mean, it was very, very cool to see that. I think it was really great for our sport. They're both two very likable individuals. But just to see the time that they laid down was kind of insane. It was just insane to see their performances in what was not, like I said, the swim was not wetsuit legal for age groupers or professionals. Obviously, the age groupers could wear one optional if they wanted to at the get to the back of the line. Bike course was fast, as always in Texas. It's the appropriate distance. The benefit that the pros did have is there was no wind on course until I think around like 10:30, 11, and by that time they basically, the pros got no wind and then they got tailwind coming home. So they had no big wind to fight. Having said that, the first loop's pretty much you're doing it by yourself, and you saw a lot of legal drafting, which made bike times a little bit faster. But the second loop is always a little bit slower because you've got all the age group traffic from all the people that, and then you got age groupers who haven't probably ridden their bike outside in 2.5 years, and they're swerving left and right, and they're riding two abreast like they're out for a training ride. But then the heat came. I mean, it was hot. It wasn't overly hot. I mean, it was definitely not warm. I mean, excuse me, it was definitely not cold. It was hot, but it was sunny. There was no cloud cover. And it was a baker. You saw him, they were but Blummenfelt looked just like he was on a Sunday stroll. And Katt Matthews, I saw her twice, and I saw her about maybe 13, 15 seconds before she made the pass on Knibb. And it was like a machine, just like a machine. It was crazy to watch, incredible performances. And I think pretty exciting just to kind of see like what the rest of the year, how that pans out for, the professionals, but just to continue to watch like the sport evolve at the level and at the pace that it's evolving at is kind of wild. Just to see how quickly, I mean, it was just 2 years ago they did like the breaking 7 or breaking 8 thing for the females, and the breaking 7 for the guys. It was like drafting, just like the breaking 2 for the marathon. I don't know that we're that far off from seeing them do it solo. I mean, especially for the females, like to be that close on, a fair. I mean, yeah, it's just wild. It was wild. I'm not sure if you watched much of the broadcast, but I mean, even if you didn't, just looking at the times, is kind of wild.
Yeah, I didn't watch, but I got to say, every time I look at the pro thing and I see a bike in the 3 hours, it kind of demoralizes me, man.
From a 40-plus-year-old.
Yeah,
from a 40-plus-year-old blow his way through the field. And just a funny side note, we always tell people to get off their feet before the race. I think I saw Kim Wurf 7 times on Friday. Out with family and kids. He was out walking his dog. Every time I was outside of the hotel, he was out doing something. So he was definitely not chilling. But yeah, in the 3:53, right, was the time. It makes you feel a little bit on the slow side.
Yeah, man. And then when I thought you were talking about them taking selfies, and I thought you meant on the course, that would have been super impressive.
Oh, no, they definitely were not in selfie mode on the course. They were definitely not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your home run, that's more like, the way athletes act now, right in the middle of the play and shit. Like in the NBA, they just go off to the sidelines during the plays and take selfies and shit now.
Yep.
But yeah, no, that was a crazy. And you said in the bike, Knibb was 4:10 or something like this, and I saw she had, or I don't know, was that wrong? I could be way off, but I did see her have
she was a little bit slower than that, but not. I mean, it was still fastest bike time, I think, by a woman ever, and I think Katt was only 20 seconds behind.
I did see Knibb bite it on her dismount.
She did bite it on the dismount. I did not catch that. I think I was actually walking down trying and catch. To try and catch him, and then I heard that she took a spill, which, I mean, you and I sat at the what was it, TD, the coming into T2, the bike dismount at Ironman Chattanooga. We saw at least 14 people bite it in a 10-minute span.
Yeah, that was Louisville.
Was it Louisville?
Yeah, it was Louisville.
But
no, it's hilarious because her shoe flew off her paddle.
Oh, really?
All kinds of. She had to go over and pick up her shoe, and maybe she got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean, there's obviously there's tons of, speculation. She was just there as an early season race to check the box and get her, get her Kona qualifying slot, and that's her big race of the year. But, it was funny, right? Because you seeing all these different, even from different, different ages. I mean, you got Kim Wurf, who's, I think he's 43, 41, 42, 43, something like that. Fastest by, I mean, totally crazy. And it was just from a coaching and just an observation standpoint before you even get to the age group race, seeing how completely different. And this is why I think social media can be such a great thing, right? By trying to help inform your decisions. But when you try to copycat a professional, maybe it might not be the best case scenario, just from how differently not like in a crazy way, but like, they all train a little bit differently. Some are high volume, some are low volume, for them, right? But then like the bike positions alone, I mean, like Gustav Iden looked like his chin was below the stem, and Blummenfelt looked like he was sitting up trying to catch as much air as possible.
Interesting.
Right? It's like, and even watching some of the females, like it's really wild. Like I know we mentioned this, on the podcast a few weeks ago, just how different technology has come and how like, everyone used to be pumping up, their 21 or 23 millimeter tires up to like 105, 110, 115. Now we've got, 25, 28s, sometimes bigger on the rear and on the front, and how the wider the tire, the better. And then you're not the PSI isn't nearly as high. And then back in, I remember like when I first got into like the sport, like TT bars, you wanted them totally slammed down as low as possible. You wanted straight extensions, like just straight. You didn't want like the S-bend because that was slower. And now you're seeing these front ends like so high, and their arm, their hands are so high. Everything is high, and it's moved forward some so they can like kind of bring their shoulders in. But I mean, it was nuts. And like the watching like how different the hydration, it's just everyone's bike looks so different, and they look so different on it. Then you got different aero helmets and different choices. It's just, it was pretty crazy to see just how different everyone looks. And obviously, as a professional, you would think that the majority of them have done some kind of, wind tunnel testing, or at least something to make an informed decision to help kind of dictate what they, where they want to be position wise. And obviously some people make a choice to maybe give up a little bit of aerodynamics on the bike, like to me, like looking at Blummenfelt, and I remember this was true, like watching Paula Findlay, and this is years ago, back in when they did Clash or Challenge Daytona, whatever it's called, at the very end of the COVID year, and she smashed everyone on the TT bike, and she looked like she was in a very similar position, like pretty straight up. Mm-hmm. And I remember her saying, and I would imagine this has to be true for some of the guys and girls right now, is that you're giving up a few watts by maybe being a little bit higher, but if your hip angle is a little bit more open, you can generate more power. So you might not be as slippery, but it also probably makes it a little bit easier to run off the bike, not being like, because watching Eden, he looked like he was parallel to the ground. He looked like his belly button and his nipples were like facing the concrete. He was so low. And you got to wonder, one, like, and obviously they're professionals, we're not professionals, but to me, I always have to wonder, like, is that, how much harder does it make to take in nutrition, that being that horizontal and that low, versus like sitting up? And, KB's had like some digestive issues. I mean, we all got to see him basically throw up on live television at Kona last year. So did that, maybe have him sit up a little bit more than he had before? But
I think it's like when you're that low, and I just think you have to really bend your body frequently, almost to create the ability to have that mobility, mm-hmm. And it just seems to me like, unless you're always locked into that, and, it could be almost one of these things where, it takes a long ass time for your body to even be able to handle that. Cause I've looked at that. I've talked about that before. I've always wanted a lunch table or a tabletop up there, to ride like that, because, if you can get some kind of advantage out of that, having, like you're saying, you can still have good aero position and get enough of that. But like just the idea of being that flexible and lower back strength and, everything else involved with being that low, I just think takes a lot of work, and it in its own right, it's like its own work, you know what I mean? Rather than on top of riding a crap ton and everything else. And I don't know, man. I mean, I suppose like in a perfect world that might make sense if you're like worlds above in like power and ability in that position. But I would just think, man, I mean, I've had that experience.
I agree. And I think, and again, this is total speculation, but I think, sometimes these guys have to make these decisions because the first off, the front pack coming out together was the biggest front pack I've ever seen come out of the water together at any full distance race. And I was standing there at that swim exit, and there was at least 18 to 20 guys. There was no gap at all. Back, I mean, even just like 2 years ago, you always saw guys like Ben Canute way off the front, or something like the short course guys way off the front by at least a 90 seconds, 2 minutes. That was not the case. Like, there was a giant front pack, and I'm sure some of them probably regret not like pushing it a little bit more. I did think it was a little bit of a slower swim.
So you think that's what it was? More than the other guys trying harder, or like working to keep.
Yeah, I think the and this is something all age groupers should hear. Probably 5 years ago, even professionals were like, "Yeah, the swim doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter what pack I come out with." But now that everyone has raised their level so high, if you don't make that front pack, you're in trouble. You're just in trouble. I mean, yeah, you can have guys like Lionel Sanders Oceanside come back from 5 minutes down to 70.3. In a 70.3, sure. In an Ironman, that's not happening. Like, the days of guys coming out in like the third or fourth pack in Kona and come back to win, those days are gone. I mean, you could even ask Patrick Lange, like, coming out in the pack he did in Kona is what set him up for that day. Because now that they've got Race Ranger, which basically, is a device you put on the back of the bike of professionals and lets you know what distance they are behind them. They're getting even faster, because now, instead of being at maybe 13, 14, 15, 16 meters behind the guy in front of you, because you don't want to get popped and you can't, easily tell how close you are, you're giving an extra 4 meters, which if you combine that 4 meters to, times 6, 7 guys, and now we're talking like a 30, 40 meter difference and less draft that you're getting from, the second, third person to the 9th, 10th, 11th person. Now that with Race Ranger, with a light blinking, you can just sit exactly at 12 meters to get maximum benefit. You saw guys on the televised, they're just soft pedaling because they don't want to get in. They also don't want to pass. They're like, hey, I'll let you do the work. I'll sit 7, 8, 9 people back. But what you also saw, and this is kind of my thought with Eden, was maybe he's got to give, maybe because he had that huge layoff, right, where he lost his mom. He was injured. He would probably readily admit like he doesn't have like the fitness that he is accustomed to having. His numbers aren't quite there. Like maybe he's thinking, hey, if I swim as hard as I can make the front pack. And as long as I'm in the front pack, if I'm super aero, because I don't have the power to maybe hang, I can just be super, super aero, because we saw him get a flat, which also was, like textbook how to change a flat in a professional race. Like, he saw that he had a front puncture. And he waited for neutral support to get next to him, talk to him, and then told them to go up the road so he could slow down and stop at them. And it was like a 30-second change. But once he got popped off that front, it was over. I mean, he went from being in the front back and at one point leading the race to being 3.5 minute, 4 minute. And then you saw how quickly his speed deteriorated on the run. I think a lot of that was because he was having to bike so hard to minimize the damage. But yeah, I mean, it's the days are gone where you can't, where you like everybody. Cam Wurf. I mean, this is a great lesson, I think, for all people to see him swimming where he is now in the second pack and only coming out a few minutes from where he used to be. He's a professional and he's still working on his swimming. He's got it to where he's, sniffing out, top 10s and, fastest bike splits. And he came in first off the bike. To see his swim improvement at the age he is at after being in the sport for such a long period of time, like, to me, that should be really encouraging to the age group athletes that are like, hey, like, I should be able to still improve. But yeah, I mean, the swim is crucial. I mean, because you come out of the water with the fast guys, they're going to bike fast, and that's your time to put in as much time as possible and work with the group while everyone else is having to maximize their energy. And I'm sure that's like part of the reason, but like one of the considerations you got to think about, when you kind of play your strengths against your weaknesses or play your weaknesses against your strengths, is you think of a girl like, somebody like Knibb, who came out with top 2, I think it was Zelenkus was the top 2 swimmers. And then as soon as she got on the Hardy Toll, she just dropped her like she was nothing. And then she rode solo for about 100 miles. I think Katt had somebody to work with for just a little bit. But you're just saving energy, so again, like, the swim on the professional side, it's more important than ever to come out in that front pack and to be a good swimmer. and people are putting way more effort into the swim than ever before. And I love seeing it, obviously, as we've been preaching this for, the entirety of the podcast, but I think it's a good message to age groupers too, just how important the swim is. Because again, you saw people panicking on Saturday morning. I heard in the elevator going down is like, no wetsuit, no wetsuit, no wetsuit. I'm like, this is what we signed up for. Like, a wetsuit should be the cherry. And that we talked, plenty of times how Texas, that is a slower swim. You can't see or shit. The course is a weird shape. Once you get into the canal, it's slow because it's shallow, and you've got the river, the river walk on both sides. So you're getting a little bit of chop on both sides of that. Luckily, it wasn't foggy like it was the day before. That would have been even more of a cluster. But I mean, it was slow. It was a slow swim. A lot of age group times were slow. You're out in the water that much longer. The water was warm, and so you're thinking about being in the water at a hot race, like being in the water that much longer, even if it's like, 5-10 minutes in that water, expending more energy, that's just zapping you for the bike. And then you get on the bike and you just don't have any wind, but it's still, it's still hot. I saw probably more burns than I've ever seen in my entire life in a race. I mean, people were fried on the run. And it just starts to eat at you from the moment you get, instead of getting out of the water fresh and ready to bike, controlled and comfortable. It wasn't carnage, but it was close to it. I mean, and the other benefit you get from being in the water first, and I told some of our athletes, it's like, get in the water first because there's no wind now, but there will be wind later. And so as the wind picks up, you're also tired. So the sooner you're out of the water, the sooner you're on course, check. The sooner you're out of the water, check. The sooner you're on the bike course, the sooner you're off the bike course, and the less you're having to deal with some of the harder conditions. So you're saving energy on the bike by not having to deal with the harder conditions, and you're off the bike a little bit quicker. So you're also on course less time. Then you're able to get to the aid stations on the run when the temperature is a little bit lower with more energy, having been on course less time. It could be a 20-minute difference. 10-minute less swim equates to a bigger gain on the bike because you're not out there when the wind's is high. But the longer you take, the harder the conditions usually get. Like, there's been very few races that I've ever been to where it's like, except for that year it was Louisville, right? That it was like, it got cold but also got windy, where it's like, the temperature really dropped as the day went on. It felt really good. No, no one ever says that. And the wind never dies down. It always creeps up. So it's, again, when you talk about a sport that's all about energy, saving energy and the demands, I just don't think people really take into consideration how much energy they're losing. And then just these small, even again, like 10 to 15 minute differences in the amount of traffic and people you have to go through, like the amount of people you have to avoid, like the upper body strength that it takes to handle your bike when you've only been biking inside, and maybe first lap isn't that bad. But I mean, you saw Knibb, who's not a terrible bike handler, but she's also not as like kamikaze as Katt Matthews is. Like, you saw her lose time to Katt on the second loop because I think Knibb was being so careful around the age groupers to not hit them that she lost time, which is more energy being allocated towards something that's not propelling you forward. And, and just reading through comments and seeing people mention like how sore their upper body was from riding on the toll road and having to grip things really, really hard so they don't hit people. I mean, it's just, again, like, there's just all these little things I think we just continuously don't consider, or just choose not to consider because they aren't super flashy. But I mean, just getting outside and getting on your bike more. I know it's early season. That's not ideal for everyone. But you could see it add up. I mean, we were commenting like during the race, like at the point that we saw people, which is at mile like 7.5 in the first loop, there was really no in between. You either looked great or you looked terrible. There was like no mediocre. There was like, you looked like great and you were happy and smiling and feeling good and you were running hard, or you looked like you been hit by a bus. And that's just, that does that cumulative toll from the heat, from the wind picking up. Because I remember looking at my weather app around 11:30, 12, and when it started the day, it was 0 miles per hour, which is something that you never see in Texas. And you definitely don't see it for this race. It was reading 0 miles per hour to start the swim. And then even at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, it was reading like less than 5. Again, compared to last year, that's nothing. And then, but once like 10:30, 11 o'clock hit, it was 15 to 22. Yeah. That's a huge difference when you're going from no wind and now you're getting popped with the wind at a more fatigued state. Plus, it's also getting hotter at the same time. So you're on course longer than you may or may not thought you would have been, expending more energy to fight through the wind and getting hotter because the temperature, for most people getting off the bike, feels like 87, 88, 90 between 12 and 4.
Yeah.
And then, and then you're just hot. And so, again, like all these things add up, and they really affect people's races in ways that I think you don't consider when you're doing your regular trainer session or your swims or your runs, like all these outside factors that can affect how much energy you're, again, not really spending, but how much energy you're wasting in a department that isn't, allocated and specifically, like for propulsive effort, and how much energy you can waste during an event that's so long and how quickly it can add up.
Yeah, man, it's, Texas has always been one of those races that I've kind of had an eye on. It's just sort of this weird, like, buckle up in the winter and just kind of get down there and get one, go get one. But it's, you mentioned a lot of the pros, or some of the pros, were down there training in Texas. And I just don't know if there's any, especially coming from up here, or, Northeast or wherever you're coming from, if you're not used to that Texas heat, man, it's a different animal. That sun down there is different. You said a lot of people are burned, and like that kind of shit, you don't even like realize what that's taken out of you. And, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I remember I used to go to, like, on spring break, and one year I actually spent some time in a tanning bed beforehand. It actually worked. I don't really like tanning beds or anything like that, but just to get a little bit of a base on there, I think that might be a thing. And, just like you're saying, man, getting outside. I mean, if you've only been outside on the bike a couple times and then you decide to do Texas in the sun and the wind, that is just like, from a mental stress perspective, I think alone, it's just that you're maybe like 5% more tense. How long, over a course of 112 miles, how much does that take out of you? It's got to be a little bit of or it's got to be a real thing. I mean, it's just like,
there were multiple people I saw on the run, and I said, like, I wouldn't be shocked if you go to the hospital. Like, that's how bad they
had a way to pump them up.
Right. It's right.
I mean, way to give them confidence out there.
Exactly. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
You should maybe give up.
You should maybe think about, going to the sponsored Memorial or Ironman Hospital and checking things out. No, but like, I mean, I remember even, just from like the heat, right? And yes, there's heat prep. And then and like you said, like, this is why for like Kona, they go out to the island like 2 weeks ahead of time. And they do, because to me, it's not just about acclimation. Like, for age groupers, it's really hard. Like, yes, you can do hot water immersion. There's science behind that. You can do sauna. You can do steam. You can do long sleeves. But none of us are doing that for 10, 11, 12 hours.
And it's the sun, man.
It is. I mean, that's just a fact. It zaps you. 100% zaps you. And it just makes it feel hotter. Right? Like, if you're like, and I'm not sure that I haven't read anything about this, but I'm sure if it was like 80 and like not a cloud in the sky versus like 83 in clouds, your RP is higher with the 80 and sunny. A couple degrees cooler, quote unquote, but the sun exposure is what zaps you, right? It takes effort and energy to cool that. And I remember even telling our athletes the day before we had lunch on Friday, and I think that morning it was wetsuit legal. And I told them all, I said, well, tomorrow it's not going to be wetsuit legal. I can promise you that. It's going to get warmer. And you know what? And kudos to Ironman, because it was not that much higher. It was like 76.8. So it was just a few points away from being wetsuit legal. So kudos to them for not bailing out everybody who had to have a wetsuit by doing what people think they usually, which is finding, like, dumping a few ice cubes in and testing things out. But I told them, I said, do not wear a wetsuit. If it's, and for a lot of these people, like, do not wear a wetsuit if it's over 7, unless you have to do it and you're just going to panic. Like if it's over 72, 73, I wouldn't wear one. When the ambient temperature is going to be as hot as it is and the sun exposure is going to be as hot as it is, the amount of, and there have been studies on this and it's been shown, the rise in your core temperature and the rise in your heart rate from wearing a wetsuit is so high that you're starting the bike almost already cooked. You're not going to drop it. You're just keeping it cooked till it gets cooked even higher, right? It's like that's how bad it can overheat you and plus you're wearing a swim cap. I mean, I learned this lesson, whatever it was that year we did Ohio. It wasn't wetsuit league. I came out of the water baked. It just, and I know this because of when I swim, like that's why I've started. I used to never wear a swim cap when I trained.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Hate wearing them. But dude, because it's so hot.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell a difference in just the mere fact of wearing a swim cap and how quickly I overheat in a pool versus not having one on. And anyone who swims and swims relatively hard can tell you this, how much cooler it feels when you take off your swim cap. To finish out, you say you're doing like, a 3K swim and the first half of it's hard and you get so hot, it immediately lowers your RPE. And so that's just for a small swim cap on your head, not a 4 millimeter thick wetsuit that covers the entirety of your body except for your face, your hands, and your feet. And people are just roasting. I mean, I saw people obviously wearing them anyway, but like you're roasting. Your race to me is done. I mean, I didn't say this out loud because I was done. I was waiting for my TED Talks until the run, but I saw a guy with his, it was obviously wetsuit optional, and he was going to have to be at the back of the line with his wetsuit on like 25 minutes before the gun went off for the pros. And I was like, you know what? That guy's day is done. His core temp's he probably already dehydrated. I mean, it's just, you always don't think about that kind of stuff, which is why ever since that race in Ohio, whenever I swim, I wear a swim cap, because I felt like that small difference in how hot I got. I think people should go, we were talking before we went live about like you wearing like a thermal cap. I honestly think like if you're going to some of these hot races, you should probably double cap it and swim. Find the hottest pool you can get to and swim. Yeah, like a 20, 25 minute hot tub afterwards, like that's not the same. You should double cap it and swim. Not every time, but feel what it's going to be like when you get out of that water and it's so hot. I mean, 76, I think it was like 76. It doesn't sound hot to me or to most people, but 72 feels hot to me. I mean, you're hot. And so if the goal is to stay as cool as long as possible and keep your heart rate as low as possible, expend as less energy as possible, not only are you starting to swim, or not only are you getting out of the swim and with your core temp already high, you've already expended energy, right, to try to cool yourself down and to try to lower your heart rate. That's a total waste. 100% total waste. And you could just work on getting more comfortable in the water, or just making that tactical decision, say, you know what, the 2 minutes I might gain on the swim by wearing my wetsuit is not worth being in the water. And then this is for, like let's say the average age group swims for this race is probably like 118, 120. That was probably the average. Think about the difference. You might give up 2 minutes from dropping from like a 120 to a 118, but you were still in the water for 118 with a wetsuit on. So what you may have gained in speed, you're losing out in the heart rate core temp game. Period. The 2 minutes isn't worth it. And so again, I think like there's, and then from like a heat prep standpoint, again, like to me, it's not about, the amount of heat prep you can do, especially if you don't live in a, because even for Texas, like I've got a lot of athletes that live in Texas, and they said that was like the first really hot week they've had this year, like consistently hot week. Mm-hmm. And so they weren't even like, super prepared. I mean, no one's fully prepared for 90 unless you live in 90 for like a couple months. It was just hot, and your performance, what is it, like 60, like I think low 60s, high 50s is like perfect run weather. And then once you start to like go up in degree or go down in degree, your body has to, again, expend energy to either keep itself cool or to warm itself up, depending on what direction you go. Just thinking about 90 with the dew point in like the 60s, There's just a lot of things that you have to, to take into consideration when you're doing these things. And I don't think that people spend enough time, one, considering what their prep looks like, but two, and probably the biggest thing is like managing their expectations of the impact that this kind of temperature and the length of time that you're in it and the sun exposure is going to have on the totality of your event. Right? From the time you got out of the water, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. You're at the whole time. And on the toll road, there's nothing. There is no shade, zero. You're just getting baked. And I agree, like there's just something to be said for just like straight up direct sun exposure. So you're having to deal with the elements, and it zaps your energy. And I definitely think raises the RPE level of effort just by mere fact of it being sunny. And then you get on the run, and there's not much shade in there. When there is shade, it's like sucking all the wind because the wind did pick up. But it's also, to me, like every course giveth and taketh away in some area. While the Woodlands provides a faster quote unquote bike course sometimes, that it's congested on the second one, and you've got it's not the smoothest but not the roughest bike course either. Like you're an aero the whole time if you want to, and then on the run it's loops. You see a lot of people, but there's also not a lot of shade, and when you do, it sucks the wind. And the swim isn't wetsuit legal, and it's hard to navigate. I think for a lot of people, it's hard to see that last buoy, and there's not really a lot of great things to side off of. Like there is no easy race. Everything provides a challenge. Every race provides a challenge. And you said it, I think, earlier, just for a quick second, but like I always try to remind my athletes and myself, I know an early season race sounds exciting, but it provides an enormous amount of challenges. Especially if you're someone who needs to ride outside and you need that exposure. Like there's really, like you're waiting for an August, September, October race. You're getting the reverse benefit sometimes. You're out in the heat. You're out in the humidity. You're getting and then it cools down, like maybe a Chat or a California or some of these later season races. You actually get like that seasonal EPO effect versus the other way where you're coming from 50s and 60s and jumping to 90s. We're talking like easily an hour, if not more, over the course of a distance race. Easily. But every course has their challenges, right? You got California, who's got a super fast swim, but it can be windy and rainy. You got Maryland, which is the same way. Chattanooga, it can be 9,500, it could be 60, right? And maybe there's a late bike course change. Florida, the wind could pick up and it could be like a super choppy swim. Arizona, the water could be below 60 and freezing. And then you got extra loops on the bike. Lake Placid, super hard, hilly and run. It could be hot. It could be like there's always something. And so I just think that we could all, do a better job of reminding ourselves like every race is hard. Like so when you think you're cherry picking a race because it's, this, like don't consider just the course. Think of the timing of the year. Think about temperatures. Think of the life stress you're going to carry into it based on, how things are. Like there's a lot to take into account when considering a race besides FOMO, or that you've done it before, or that's the only one you want to do. Like if you really want to get the most out of yourself, like you really do, I think, have to spend probably a lot longer than most people want to spend kind of combing through the details of the race and the logistics and what they're going to be prepared for. And while, oh yeah, I can heat prep. Like, are you really going to take the time to heat prep? Because that's extra time. Right? Because if you got 12 hours of training volume, you can take a week. If you really want to do a heat prep, you're going to have to tack on time to that. Do you have that time? And if you're not going to have that time, then let's not worry about doing that if you really, really, really want to do your best at it. Right? Or the swim is really, really tough, but you only want to swim once or twice a week. That's probably not going to end up well for you. Like it adds.
I agree, man.
Right. It all adds up, and it's just like they're all hard. I know we've got talked about plenty of podcasts, but like I'm always reminded every time we go spectate a race, it's 140 miles. Yeah. And you saw people come out of the swim roasted, like they've been laying on the barbecue for 35 minutes, and people going off the bike, and you see them like, and there's just, yeah, I mean, and it's just, it's a complex sport, which is why we love it and hate it sometimes, but it's also why we always feel like we can do something better, because there's so many different things to dial in and get right. that also means there's a large like gap in room for things to go wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about this. I think you got, obviously the preparation and that sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot of times when I'll be like, I'm going to go do some heat prep, and I put on my hoodie and I start running. I take that thing off like in a mile. I'm like, this is just, it's just, but it's, I was thinking back to that day we did Louisville. It was legit 100-degree air temp around like 11 in the morning or noon or something.
Mm-hmm.
And like, when I think about negative split mentality, I think that I've talked about it before, but I talk about letting my cooling system get into gear, not forcing. We talked about it before, like overheating and how hard it is to come back. It's almost impossible if you go too far. So it is one of these weird things where, like, specifically, I think about that race, and I was really trying to chill the swim, and it was not wetsuit, so that was fine, and took it super easy. I felt amazing getting out of the swim. I had a good, decent bike. And, you're on the bike, so it's maybe 100 degrees or 90 degrees or whatever, but you don't feel like it is all the time because you're, and I'm always like trying to, that's the other thing is I always try to get like freezing before I get in the water, as uncomfortable as it is, because a lot of times in the morning people are colder anyway, and I try and make myself cold. That's one of the things I've started to do is just get uncomfortably cold. I mean, if I can, lower my core temp just a bit, every bit helps, right? So, but yeah, to kind of start under control with that, because if you get out and even it's harder to tell in the water if you're going too hard sometimes. The next thing you know, you're over, getting hot in the water and you don't realize it. So anyway, I'm getting off the bike at Louisville and I felt really good, and I'm like, I didn't feel that hot. I threw some water on myself in that first mile. Like I told the story before, but at mile one, at the end of mile one, I felt good running out of there and I was like, I'm going to go get it. And I got so hot I couldn't correct at that point. And I really, like sometimes you reflect on it and I was like, man, I wish I kind of would have almost just walked out of there and tried to get myself cold again, just to have a baseline to start that run with. And you don't necessarily have to walk, but you know what I'm saying, man. It's like your legs are warmed up and you're feeling good. And the next thing you know, you're a mile or two into it and you're so damn hot and overheated that just basically ruins the entire marathon. Unless you, take a big chunk to kind of, but even still, I was, you spend the whole day, I was trying to get soaked by hoses. I couldn't get it back. And I think, partially that's being aptly hydrated, coming into it, because that's the other thing on the bike. Sometimes it's warm out and you're like, you think you're drinking enough, but you're probably not, and you're not getting enough sodium to hold it in, whatever, all these things. And then, because if you've got a good hydration base going into that run, you know how it is, man, you can wake up and dehydrated and go out in the heat. And it's like, that feeling is different. Sometimes, I can run in heat and it doesn't bother me because I'm sweating, low sweat and it's not crazy, but there's other times. And I think that's what happens in Ironman a lot, is it just people get to that run and they're just so hot that they can't manipulate their system is out of whack. It's like a overheated thermostat. That's just wacky.
It's just so hard, I think, to consider yourself heat prepped with a couple rides and a couple runs and a couple no fan trainer rides.
Yeah.
I think that's, and again, like I tell our athletes this all the time, like that's why the only things you can really count on and plan for on race day is effort and execution. And to me, like the wind and heat are the ultimate race day factors. Like, because they're the ones you can't really plan for and predict and train for perfectly, right? Because you can train in the wind. Yes, you can do heat prep, but it's never going to be exactly what's going to look like on race day, because you never know what it could be. It could be tailwind, headwind, could be headwind, tailwind, could be crosswind, it could be 5 to 10, could be 15 to 20. Same thing with heat, and then you do all this heat prep and all of a sudden you get a cold race and you're like, oh, I've made, like, now you have to, adjust your fueling strategy. I've been doing this heat prep, for a race, and now it's not going to be hot, but all my like, fueling strategies and hydration strategies and sodium and electrolytes, they've all been geared towards like a 90-degree race, and it just popped up like 65. Like, now what the fuck do I do? Because you can't have the same one. Because one, you're probably gonna be on course less with cooler temps, right? And then you're also not gonna be sweating as much. So how do you adjust that? And then do you push out more power, right? Which is what a lot of people do, which again is a mistake, because you're not, like you're on course for, the weather dictates you can push higher power, lower RP and lower heart rate, but are you, because that's also like I think one of the problems with just going by heart rate too, only outside of like a kind of a secondary guideline on the bike, is you're training for 90, degrees, and it's 65. Well, your heart rate's going to be lower, but that could be a huge difference, in from like a 135 heart rate in 90 degrees to a 135 heart rate in 65 degrees, and the amount of power that you're putting out. And just because your heart rate dictates it's the same as at 135, that might be 15 watts extra on the bike. And you might not be prepared for that, right? That could be a significant jump in intensity factor that you could have on the bike. It also makes it harder. The higher intensity you have on a bike, it makes it harder to digest fuel because you're at a higher intensity. And so again, like there's just so many extra things to take into account when people ask, myself, and they ask this, like, do you think I'm ready? It's always about the distance. It's never about the intangibles. Like, do you think I've done enough? Like, what is your fueling plan ready? You know how to change a tire? You know what you're going to wear? You know what like plan A, B, and C might look like? Or how are you going to handle special needs? Are you comfortable with the fueling on course? Are you going to wear arm coolers, or are you not going to wear arm coolers? Like, how are you going to mitigate the heat on the run? Like, have you have a plan on the aid stations? Like, what are you going to start? And like all the, like, no one ever worries about that. It's always like, hey, I feel like I need to do the distance. I'm like, but if you asked them questions about, how they, are they prepared for a non-wetsuit swim, or are they prepared for a high wind, and how are they going to manage that? And do they have a plan? Like, most of them are going to say no, because we plan for the perfect fitness and the perfect execution, the perfect race day. But then there's really no such thing as a perfect lead up, and there's really no such thing as a perfect race day conditions, and there's really no such thing as the perfect execution. Like there is, but like once in a blue moon. So everything else has to be done on the fly. And that's why you have to have like plan A through C before you do that. And that's just, I think, really difficult for people to wrap their brain around in terms of like the amount of extra detail that we need to have in such a complex sport that can offer, right, which is why I think like the longer the course, the better it suits the more mentally and emotionally prepared and the more detail oriented individual. Like, take that over fitness, because in Ironman racing, because of how long it is and how many mistakes you can make, like it's, from a place and overall standpoint, it's almost about like, who can make the least amount of mistakes is going to win that day. And you see in the pro field too, like who's going to make the least amount of mistakes, who overswims, who doesn't get a flat tire, who chooses to drop back and, and let everyone else do the work, or, like who goes out way too hard the first 5 or 6 miles because they want to play a certain game or they want to catch up in the front, then watch them blow up. Like they, professionals, if professionals are still making these kind of mistakes, you can imagine the extent of the mistakes the age groupers are making and how much of an effect that has on the race. And while we can always make it about fitness or training or tapering, like some of the biggest time differences you see in races are just from execution, preparation, and being flexible and understanding what the race is giving you and adapting on the fly. And that's why, I know a lot of our podcasts recently have been more about being flexible and RPE and understanding things and kind of owning your own stuff. But like that's what makes you game ready, is not also always the perfectly executed everything, because race day is probably not gonna be that. There's way too many factors to consider.
Yeah, you recognize when it's going well or maybe isn't going as well as you hoped, and how can you react to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and again, that's why the sport's also so addicting, is because there's almost never you're going to have one perfect race that goes like seemingly like, just perfect. And here's the funny thing is like, even looking at myself, like I can go back and look to the race for me that was the most like perfect, to where I felt never, that was never wavering. It was Arizona. It was forever ago, but, and it went perfectly. My splits were even, my day was perfect. The weather's perfect. I mean, I was still fucking drinking back then. I got hammered the night before, sitting in my room beforehand with a glass of wine and a bottle of Di Serono, and throwing Accelerate and Durox with 90 pounds of sugar in them. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I just had a good day. And then you look at a race like I did Ironman Wisconsin. I did it, and Hayden was like 7 weeks before. My training been on the trainer. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And I definitely was underprepared, and I was only a couple minutes off. It's like there's just always something. And then I think we also kind of get lulled into, because of how different and crazy and unpredictable the human body is. Like if we have a perfect race day, I think sometimes we give ourselves too much credit. Like that was all me. That fitness, that plan, that was perfect. Was it? Or did we just have like that day where all the stars aligned and it just unfolded perfectly? Sometimes we're at our best and we get our best result despite of some of our shortcomings. And then some of our best days that we have might not be representative of time, but are best representative of the effort and the execution and the ability to adapt and, make their way through a variety of, hardships during the race. And that's why, again, that's, you can hang your hat on times and placings, and those are important, obviously, but there's so much that goes into it that it's hard to, that's why every race is unique. And while like the very first coach I had, for 15, 16 years ago, he said, I asked him what the hardest race he's ever done was, and he said, the hardest race I've ever done is the one I'm training for right now. Mm-hmm. Because they're always unpredictable, and you never know how the training cycle is going to go. You never how the race is going to go. I always think they're going to be really, really hard. And if you go in with that mentality, at least you're prepared for the worst instead of expecting the easiest.
Yeah, and that brings up the mantra. It's not how fast you go, it's how little you slow down. Mm-hmm. And I think, it was really resonating with me right there, because I think if you train with that mentality, because, as everybody, I want to get fast. I just want to be faster, but can you hang? It's like you just watched it, man. Like people just fade. And it doesn't matter how fast you are going in if you can't hold you know what I mean? It's like you got to be able to hang in there. It's like, I've had really great first half Ironman, the first loops, but then I've, crumbled or whatever. It's just, there's a lot of shit in there.
Never ending puzzle to this day. I mean, that's why you still see professionals trying to figure it out. That's why they're also getting faster, is because they're paying more attention to different details. But even when they do that, they still implode. And like, this is their life. They don't have most of them don't have full-time jobs. And that's why you see some of them have incredible seasons, and the next season you're like, what happened to them?
Yeah.
It's like, it's ever changing and ever evolving. That's why you can't ever stay the same.
All right, man. Keep evolving.
That was it. What'd you say?
Keep evolving.
Keep evolving. I love it. As always, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com, and it's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. Or if you need anything from me specifically, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
Yeah, one final thing. If you're doing Wisconsin, go to the website and sign up for that camp.
Yes.
We're going to be riding the loops and swimming in the lake and running the course and all that kind of stuff. So check it out.
Doing all the things.
All right, man. I'll catch you later.
Check it Thursday.
Yep. See ya.